Welcome back, everybody. You're locked into Testosterone Fantasy Sports. We'd like to take just a moment right now to go in a different direction on the show. Yeah, it's Week 15 in the NFL, but for a lot of fantasy players out there, the season is over. So what do you do right now? You take a look at what's going on in the college ranks. And as far as the NCAA is going, a lot of the teams are done right now. The Heisman is going to be, it was just awarded today, in fact. And so we've got a very special guest on the show. We'd like to welcome Shawn Zobel to the show. Shawn does draftheadquarters.com, and you're a bit of a prodigy, so to speak, 19 years old, college student, and we'd just like to welcome you here, Shawn.
Thanks for
being
me.
a part of the show,
Thank
man.
you.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your site, man. You were telling me a little bit that you started it 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell me from where you started to where it's come now, what's it mean for you as far as starting this business?
It really means a lot. I obviously started it in February of 2007, so not exactly 2 full years yet, but it's getting there. And I really just started out as a hobby. I've always been a huge NFL draft fan. I've gone to the draft in New York every year for the past 5 years. So
awesome.
yeah, huge NFL college football fan. So I just kind of decided to start it out as a hobby, see how it would go. And the first year my mock draft ended up placing 8th out of 95 people.
Awesome.
Of like the media analysts, the Mel Kipers, and things like that. And so that's when it really took off and turned into a business. And since then, I've just been going strong. And last year, I beat Mel Kiper, and now it's just, I don't know, it's pretty exciting, I guess.
That's awesome. He made Mel Kiper his biatch when it comes to mock drafting. So very well done, Shawn. This is a fun time for me because Shawn goes to Northwestern College right in Roseville. That's where I work, and we kind of ran into each other there. So the opportunity to have you come on and talk about what's going on in the NCAA right now is a real fun thing to do because, like I said before, a lot of people are out of their playoff hunt in fantasy football, and so it's kind of time to switch gears a little bit and take a look at what's going on. We've got the bowl games coming up down the road here pretty soon, and then of course the NFL draft happens 3 short months after the Super Bowl. So it's something that you want to kind of take a look at now, and so we'll go ahead and just kind of pick your brain a little bit, Shawn.
Yeah,
why don't we start with the quarterback position?
Okay.
It seems like it's a little bit more of a heavy position this year. We've got guys like Sam Bradford out of Oklahoma and Matt Stafford from Georgia. Why don't you talk a little bit about those guys and then share with me who you think is going to translate the best into the NFL game?
Okay. The senior class is pretty weak this year, which is why we're talking about so many underclassmen that are thinking about coming out. The senior class is led by Graham Harrell from Texas Tech and Rhett Bolmar from Sam Houston State. Bolmar actually used to play for Oklahoma, but was kicked off the team and had to transfer to Sam Houston State. So those are the 2 guys that are the leading candidates for the top senior quarterback. But I don't think there will be a senior quarterback that will go in the first at least 2 or 3 rounds. So that's why there have been so many underclassmen that we've been talking about that could go high. At this point, Sam Bradford, Matthew Stafford, as you talked about, Tim Tebow from Florida, Josh Freeman from Kansas State, and Mark Sanchez from USC are the 5 guys that have gotten the most publicity so far. I personally like Stafford the best out of any of those guys, followed by Bradford, and then I think Tim Tebow, Mark Sanchez, and Josh Freeman still fighting it out. It's hard to say who's actually going to come out because they don't have to declare for another month.
Sure.
So at this point, it's all kind of speculation, but that's what makes it fun.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of what keeps us tuning in. So, one name that I think we should talk about, Colt McCoy from Texas.
Yeah.
You didn't mention him. What's kind of going on with him? Do you think he'll come into the draft, or do you think he might go back for another season?
Yeah, at this point, it sounds like he's going to go back to Texas just because they're not going to get the chance to play for the national championship this year. Okay. He's kind of set on wanting to win the national championship. So, obviously, this year he won't have the chance to do it. So, he'd like to go back next year. And I think in terms of for the NFL draft, I think that would be a much better choice for him to go back just because playing in a spread offense at Texas, Vince Young hasn't had that great of success in the NFL, and he was running the same offense probably better than McCoy was in college. So that's a little you don't like to see that, I guess, when he's running the same system that somebody's had run in college that isn't having success in the NFL. So if he goes back to college, he'll be a 4-year starter, great experience. Maybe next year he'll get a chance to learn the pro game a little bit more while also running his spread offense. So I just think that that'd be the best move for him to go back to school.
So he would probably be projected like a third round kind of guy. Maybe
right now,
later.
if he were to come out, probably a second or third round guy, second at the highest.
So
probably,
it does make sense to go back to school, up his draft stock a little bit.
Yep.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about running back. Obviously, in fantasy football, running backs win championships, and also a rookie running back can obviously come in and make a major impact in the NFL right away, a la Adrian Peterson, guys like Chris Johnson and the like. We've got a few guys coming out this year. I see you're wearing the Shawn Moreno jersey. Let's start with Shawn. How do you like that kid from Georgia?
I really like him. He's explosive. He's one of the most exciting players to watch. Jumps over people, just out-jukes them, does everything possible to get to the end zone. I think he's by far one of the most explosive athletes in college football, probably behind Michael Crabtree. He's definitely one of the most exciting, explosive. He catches the ball real well, blocks in the passing game, does everything that you need to do to be a complete back in the NFL. So I'm pretty high on him.
Sure, as are a lot of people. I know Jesse, for one, is majorly high on him. That's probably because he's got the worst team in the Tough League, and we'll be picking #1 next year. Haha, Jesse. But I'll tell you, anybody who wants to get their mock draft fix early right now, make sure to go check out draftheadquarters.com. You've done a nice job with your mock draft. I know it's a little early.
Yeah.
It's even still hard right now to project where teams are going to fall. So, but you've done a nice job putting that together, I'll tell you. It's really interesting to me to see that you've got Shawn falling to the Broncos.
Yeah.
He would be insane.
See, that's what I'm saying.
As a Denver running back.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, obviously Denver, it doesn't have much. They haven't taken a first-round running back. They don't do that very often.
Right.
So a lot. It's obviously all speculation, but I don't think there's a better fit for Shawn Moreno than with the Denver Broncos. So if he's there for him, I think that he has to be the pick.
For sure. And, honestly, the Denver Broncos are having some major running back grizzle this season. It's probably the biggest problem that they have as a team in general, aside from the fact that they allow like 1,000 yards every game through the air and on the ground. They can't run the ball really well. They were relying on white guy Peyton Hillis until he went on injured reserve. Now it's Tatum Bell. Mike Shanahan has a need. Shawn Moreno can fill that in a great way. So don't be surprised at all if Shawn's hitting it on the head here with Shawn. One other running back I definitely want to touch on, Chris Beanie Wells from Ohio State. A lot of talent. I wonder if he's going to have the ability to stay healthy in the pro level. What's your take on Beanie?
From people that I've talked to, they say that he's one of the toughest players that they know of. So obviously he's going to be willing to play through pain. So that's a good thing to hear. Obviously him being injured last year, he had the ankle injury. Now it's been ridiculous how many injuries he's had in the last 2 years. Exactly, the toe this year. So obviously his injuries are the biggest concern, but I feel that he has so much that could help the team at the next level that I don't think you can afford to pass on him if you need a running back. So for a team like Cleveland, who's going to be picking like 8th or 9th right now, he'd be a perfect fit right there if there isn't a cornerback off the board, because they also need defensive help. But
certainly,
at this point, he looks like he's going to be a top 10, top 15 pick if he decides to come out.
Yeah, well, it's a big program. He's a highly talented guy, so he could go anywhere in there and help out a lot of teams with that hard-running style.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you could put his heart into Frank Gore's body, you'd have a great running back. But Frank Gore's heart is tiny. He just never tries. Let's move on to the wide receiver position. One of my favorite players ever in college football, Michael Crabtree from Texas Tech. Him and Graham Harrell have kind of taken this team on their shoulders and had the best season in the college's history. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about Crabtree's abilities athletically and where you think would be a great fit for him?
Right now, I think a perfect fit would be probably Seattle.
Yeah.
They run a pretty wide open passing game, similar to Texas Tech, so I think that he'd kind of fit in well there. Right now they have the 3rd pick in the draft, perfect spot for him. At this point, he's kind of on the edge as to whether he wants to come out. His dad thinks that he's going to. He said in the papers that he doesn't know if he's going to, so we'll have to wait and see about that. But I think the best move for him would honestly be to come out. You don't really say that often about a redshirt sophomore, just because sophomores don't normally do that well entering the NFL. But in this case, I think that it would be the best option for him. Obviously, his quarterback, Graham Harrell's a senior. He's going to be graduating. You might as well take advantage of your stock being as high as it's going to get right now and not risk it next year when you're playing with a new quarterback who's an underclassman, first-year starter. So I think going out while he's ahead might be the best option for him.
Yeah, and you've got him rated right now in your top 5, and I think athletically that's a great spot for him. He's going to be able to come in. Now, let me ask you this about him. Having that little less experience, do you think that'll make his learning curve a little bit bigger? Will it be more like 4 years before he can make an impact, or is he that athletically gifted that he can help out a team in the end of his first year, early second year? As you know, receivers take their time to develop.
Yeah, I think it could be a combination. I think Calvin Johnson's pretty proved that you can have an inexperienced wide receiver if he has the talent, and we saw that Calvin Johnson did, and we definitely know that Crabtree does. Okay. So I don't think that that's as much to worry about as it would be with like somebody from last year, like a James Hardy. Exactly, like a James Hardy, who was a redshirt sophomore last year, but Hardy's nowhere near the prospect that Crabtree is. So I'm not as worried about that with Crabtree as I would be with Darius Hayward-Bay, who's another receiver who's a junior from Maryland who's thinking about coming out, or Jeremy Macklin from Missouri, or Percy Harvin from Florida. Those 3 guys don't have the experience, but they also don't have the same talent level that Crabtree does. So that's why I'd be a little more concerned with those guys than I would be with Crabtree.
Of course. Well, you know, and in the NFL, we saw a trend in last year's draft. There wasn't a single wide receiver taken until the 2nd round. So you mentioned a couple of those second-tier guys. What's your take on that highly talented skill player being taken in the 2nd round? Is there a reason for that, or is it just because wide receivers take their time to develop and a lot of them are prima donnas?
Well, last year the wide receiver position wasn't that great. Obviously, the first receiver, Donnie Avery from Houston, was taken by St. Louis in the 2nd round. For wide receivers, it's one of the positions that's hardest to probably scout, I guess you would say, because they're so easy to be a bust. Right now, like Washington, for example, took Devin Thomas and Malcolm Kelly in the 2nd round. Thomas has done well at the end of this year. He started out a little slow, but Malcolm Kelly hasn't done anything. He's been hobbled by injuries, hasn't been able to get on the field. So that obviously that's a reason that you don't want to take him in the 1st round. With inexperience, as we just mentioned, that's the reason you don't want to take him. When you're talking about explosive playmaking type players, half of those players are going to be busts. I mean, that's just the way it happens. Just they aren't able to adjust to the NFL level. So why not take, just thinking from an NFL perspective, why not take your 1st round pick on an offensive lineman who you know is going to be a legit player in the NFL, and then save your 2nd round pick like the Vikings did with Sidney Rice. Use your 2nd round pick on that playmaker, because he may not have the same bust ability. He may be more of a bust player than an offensive lineman would. So that's why a lot of teams like to take your playmaker later rather than save it. And there are a lot more of them too. It's easier to find a giant offensive lineman, or it's harder to find a giant offensive lineman like Andre Smith, who's 6'5", 340 pounds. It's harder to find him than it would be to find a 4'4", 40 guy who can run the ball.
You're saying Shawn Rogers doesn't come in the league every year?
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Well, I'm really impressed, Shawn. I want to thank you again for coming on. A couple more questions before we end this segment here, but I would really like to know what you put into your mock draft to beat a Mel Kiper.
A lot of research. That's a lot of what it is. Usually, right now, it's just kind of going by what the draft order is, because the draft order changes every week. With every team winning and losing games, it fluctuates every week. So it's kind of hard to say until the season's end, and we have a solid draft order. Once that happens, then you just research every team and their team needs, and research which team would fit with which schemes. So like, for example, like a Noshan Moreno, he's not going to go to a power running team because he does more juking. So Chris Wells is going to want to go to a power running team. So Chris Wells wouldn't be the same running back in Denver's scheme as Noshan Moreno would, because Chris Wells just runs people over, whereas Noshan Moreno will out-juke you and get to the end zone. So just trying to find which players fit into which schemes is how it works too. And then just right the last few weeks before the draft, usually it's a lot of news, just who's going to go to which player, which teams like which players.
It's all lies.
Oh, exactly. See, that's what you have to, and I don't know, I guess I have some people that kind of tell me what's true, what's false, and just kind of sift through that information. And so just finding, coming down to the concrete mock draft is just, it takes a lot of work, I guess.
Yeah, well, you've done a nice job. I really like it. Again, draftheadquarters.com. Shawn Zobel. Before we get you out of here, Shawn, I do want to know, regardless of position, why don't you share with us a few players to keep an eye on, guys you really like, who you think can be potential Hall of Famers or great players in the NFL?
Right now on my board, I guess you could say, one of the top seniors that I really like is Malcolm Jenkins, cornerback from Ohio State.
Oh, yeah.
Some people in the NFL have already compared him to Champ Bailey for the Denver
wow.
Broncos, so you know that people really like him. He has everything that you need. He's got good speed, can play man, can play zone. He does well in the running game, playmaker, makes interceptions, just does everything that you need from a top cornerback. Jenkins is guarantee he's going to be a top 10 pick in April. Could go as high as the top 5 depending on how the draft order finishes out. I think San Francisco could be a perfect fit for him right now.
Yes.
Because their secondary's just been miserable this year.
They paid for it.
Yeah.
And those guys are like old. Nate Clements, I mean, he's not the same player he was in Buffalo.
Not at all.
It's crazy.
So, but that's what happens in free agency. That's why
Certainly.
that's why teams are starting to rely on the draft so much more right now. It's because you can draft these players that fit your scheme rather than just going out in the free agent market and just rolling the dice on a player that you don't know as much about.
Sure.
So that's why teams rely on the draft a lot more, I guess you could say.
Okay. And cornerback, if you take a look at Shawn's draft, mock draft, cornerback seems to be pretty thick here this year. And usually teams will look at that, I think. You can kind of back me on this. Look at that as the ability to get a quality player.
Yeah.
Another team before them might snipe the guy they like more, but they can still get a quality guy to fill a need there.
Yeah.
Any other names that you want to throw out?
Give me a position.
Talk about defensive end, a super important
defensive
position.
end. Brian Arakpo, DN from Texas. He had 11 sacks this year, 18 tackles for loss. Just won the Lombardi Award. So similar to a Vernon Golston from last year. He has like 8% body fat, runs in the 4.4s, 250 pounds exactly.
Amazing.
Yeah, so he's pretty high on a lot of teams' boards right now. Michael Johnson from Georgia Tech. He's like 6'7", 280 pounds. Runs in the probably 4.5s to 4.6s. A lot of teams like him. From the underclassmen list, keep an eye on Everett Brown from Florida State. He could run in the 4.4s to 4.5s. And then 2 other underclassmen, George Selvey from South Florida and Greg Hardy from Ole Miss. There are 2 other guys that could come out as well.
Okay, interesting. I would like to talk really quick, a local guy, the Animals kid, James Laurinaitis. He's going to be coming out. How do you like his game translating into the NFL?
Last year I liked it a lot more than I do right now. Most people expected him to come out after his junior year. He probably would have been a top 10 pick. He had an outstanding first 3 years at Ohio State. He obviously decided to go back to Ohio State with Malcolm Jenkins and Brian Rubisky and most of the seniors to try to win a championship, which they obviously won't do. But Laurinaitis' stock dropped a little bit this year. Some had to do with Ohio State not reaching that championship game.
Certainly.
Some had to do with him maybe not being as good of a player as he was last year. A lot of teams right now think that he may have peaked, similar to like a Dan Connor from last year and Paul Posluszny from 2 years ago. 2 guys who did outstanding in college, but may have peaked and wouldn't be as
like
great.
A.J. Hawk?
Similar to A.J. Hawk.
A.J. Hawk
Yeah.
from the Packers.
Exactly. So he's still definitely one of the best linebacker
Certainly.
prospects in the last few years, but he may not be the same elite talent that we thought he was a year ago. So obviously his stock has hurt a little bit. Last year he was going to be a top 10 pick. Right now, a fair estimate would be top 25.
Sure. Interesting. So he's definitely not the animal, is what you're saying.
Well, he's still an animal, but
Okay.
not the same animal as he
Right.
was last year.
Certainly, certainly. So, well, this is Shawn Zobel dropping science. DraftHeadquarters.com is his site. Shawn, thanks a lot for coming on, man.
Thanks for
really
having me.
Appreciate it. We're going to go to break right now. We'll be right back to break down another segment of matchups. I'm Jeff, in for Jesse. And again, thanks a lot, Shawn.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back.
If you want to win,
You must tune in
to Testosterone Fantasy Sports.